We don't know yet what will be within this report to do with ministers and staff members, but if that's what it's between, the ban from the government has made this in the public interest. Is that accurate?
Well, I haven't seen the report myself, but yeah, look, those standards of reporting those standards of behaviour are in place. They were put in place by Prime Minister Turnbull. Prime Minister Morrison has continued them. Everybody knows what those standards of behaviour are. I mean, you know, the government is constantly having discussions with the ABC on behalf of Australians about the importance of them fulfilling their charter, that their reporting is fair and balanced and the like, but otherwise, yeah, it's fair reporting. So yeah,
so you can't have this as a ministerial standard. Anything else that contravenes ministerial standards can be reported. So does that just end up in the same area as a result?
Well, the standards of behaviour are in place. Prime Minister Morrison has put them in, has made them clear. So Australians expect those standards of behaviour to be upheld.
And otherwise they can be delved into by journalists?
Well, we have a very robust fourth estate. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing to fear for that. As long as the ABC is complying with their charter and the government reminds them of that on behalf of Australians, then absolutely.
So where do you sit on this? Does it have to stick to something that would go outside of ministerial standards, or does it go beyond that? What's your thought?
Well, I think there's a couple of points to make. First of all, I haven't seen the report tonight, so let's see what happens there before any specific comments are made on the Four Corners report. I think it is important to broadly point out that the ABC can make editorial decisions to report on whatever it likes, and it's not up to the government to run interference on that. The ABC should be strong, it should be independent, it should be funded properly, and media channels, whether they're the national broadcaster or the one that we're on today with you, Tom, should be able to report without fear or favour from the government.
Sure, and that's what their charter says, so as long as they're complying with the charter.
Is there any, I suppose, hesitation if we're about to delve into these types of reports? It might not be regular, but every now and then, because of this ministerial code, that this makes it all within bounds?
I think we're sort of dealing with hypotheticals at the moment because we haven't seen what's in the actual report, and I think that there will obviously be a lot of people watching the Four Corners report tonight and seeing what it says. But I think that the ABC can report on whatever it wishes. It's an independent organisation, an independent agency, as is Sky and as are other media, and it's important that we have a free and independent media in Australia.
So I guess the ramifications, Barnaby Joyce was forced out before there was even this standard. If a minister has contravened this ministerial standard, are they gone?
Well, that's a decision for the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's put in place the standards, and as I said, you know, I don't want to prejudge people on hypotheticals, so let's see what's in the report.
But isn't the standard in there so that the decision is all but taken away from the Prime Minister? Before the standard, you had to say, well, is it appropriate? I'm not sure. Now the standard's there. If you contravene it, what's the point of the standard if there isn't a ramification?
Well, I think there will be a ramification. As to what that ramification is, that's a matter for the Prime Minister and the exact nature of what's reported tonight. But I think the Prime Minister, having put in place those standards of behaviour on behalf of Australians, would expect them to be upheld. They're very clear.
All right, we'll see. Let's turn to the US election. I'm sure you kept at least an eye, or perhaps two, on it. What did you make of, well, what's still unfolding at the moment?
Well, first things I think to say is that the Americans have turned out in record numbers and that the American democracy is alive and well and it is strong. And that is a great thing. It's a great thing for America and it's a great thing for Australia. And they've chosen to elect Joe Biden as the president-elect, and that's, I think, a good thing for the Americans. It's a good thing for Australia. And they've also chosen to elect Kamala Harris, who, watching her speech yesterday, was pretty uplifting and pretty inspiring, to be honest, that she was able to, she will occupy that high office and who knows what else. But I think that, I have to say, Tom, one thing I admire about the Conservative movement more broadly is their respect for democratic institutions, and I think that the Coalition and the Liberal Party and the National Party in Australia have respected democratic institutions really well in Australia, and it's pretty disappointing to see that the Conservative movement, led by President Trump, isn't respecting the results and the wishes of the democratic process in America, and you know, hopefully he decides to change his way and bow out gracefully.
Is it a real test for the Republican Party, do you think, right now?
Well, it's a robust democracy, and I think we should let their democracy play out. You know, after any loss, just like after any loss, the Republican Party will go through a period of considering what they do from here. But, you know, just like Joe Biden got a record turnout, so did Trump. So I think the positive to take out of it is that Americans are incredibly engaged with voting and their democracy, which is great to see, and that we've got a president elect who the Prime Minister has congratulated and who understands the importance of the Australian-US relationship.
I guess you could also say when you vote, when you don't have to, it's sometimes through fear and dislike, but you can take that as my contribution. Anthony Albanese said on Friday that Scott Morrison should contact Donald Trump to urge him to respect the result. That's not a realistic call, is it? What would Donald Trump do if he'd contacted him? Scott Morrison contacted him?
Tom, I don't think anyone can accurately predict what President Trump would or wouldn't do. I think
surely you can say that whatever it was, phone call, back channels, it wouldn't have worked.
I think that there's been reports of people close to the president trying to talk sense to him. I think I've seen reports that Melania has had a crack and that Jared Kushner also has had tried to go into the president and say, you know, it's time to accept the result. But
so they're the logical people to do it, not Scott Morrison.
Well, I think that what Anthony Albanese was rightly pointing out is that Australia stands for democracy and that the Prime Minister for Australia should stand for democracy. I think the Prime Minister's comments have been appropriate. I think that the Prime Minister...
But not only would it not have worked, but you could surely say that you thought that Albanese's call to do this wasn't appropriate in the first place. I mean, is it appropriate for a leader of another country to ring another one and say, hey, you should concede an election,
that's not what Anthony Albanese said.
Well,
and I know that there's been a number...
What did he say?
He's had two different positions.
There's been a number of attempts by coalition MPs to put the word concede in. Anthony Albanese, and you'd have to check the record, Tom, I haven't memorised it, but Anthony Albanese made the point that the Prime Minister should stand up for democracy. And I'm saying here, I think the Prime Minister's comments have been appropriate about Australia's commitment to the democratic process, and I think that that's all there is to it.
If Anthony Albanese was saying contact Donald Trump and stand up for democracy, what does that mean then?
Well, I mean...
That's just a general reference to elections.
If you won't even back him in, how can we trust Albanese when it comes to this important relationship?
Let's not make a mountain out of a molehill. I think that there is a point to be made about Australia as a close friend of the United States to stand up for democratic principles. And I'm conceding that I think the Prime Minister and all Australians have stood up for those democratic principles. In fact, the only person who's not standing up for those democratic principles right now is the President of the United States, which is disappointing. And maybe it will take international world leaders to say something to him.
Let me ask you about a couple of your colleagues essentially trying to put forward some of the claims made by Donald Trump around voter fraud, including that dead people were voting in Michigan. What did you think of that?
Well, obviously, MPs are entitled to their view and they're entitled to make representations on behalf of their constituents. But look, I think this government and this Prime Minister is focused on the Australian people.
What we saw,
and that's what we'll continue to do.
I think a couple of things posted with George Christensen and Matt Canavan. Now, they were showing on the Michigan site, look, someone who's dead's voted. I think one of them ended up being the father of someone who had voted. And the point about these electoral systems is you can put the vote in, they still get checked off at the end, right? So the dead people might have thought they voted, not themselves. But when you say on behalf of their constituents,
I think MPs are entitled to their own view, whether it's their view or a constituent who raised it for them. I don't know, but
so that doesn't change
theories. An individual MP's view doesn't change the focus of the government.
But if a constituent came to you,
on Australians and on Australian jobs, not on the US election.
Someone in Michigan voted who's dead. Can you get it out there? Is that really your issue to raise?
Well, that's up for individual MPs, which issues they decide to take up on behalf of their constituents. But my focus is not on the US election. The PM's focus is not on the US election. It is on
the Australian people. A few days last week.
I reckon even that sideshow could not have distracted the PM from Australians creating jobs, getting them back into jobs, getting them through the COVID-19 recession.
So, but if your constituent comes to you with what's happening in a state in the US, that's not something you'd put out there.
Well, I would stay focused on Australians and creating jobs, but it's for each individual MP. I don't begrudge them that.
All right. Let me ask you finally about China. Again, this was an exhortation from Labor Party that the government's just not doing things the right way with China. It just seems a bit strange when, the core issues on 5G, blocking Huawei on 5G, also calling out China on COVID-19, that somehow just being nice about it was going to satisfy the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, let's not oversimplify this. This is a complicated relationship and there are many facets, and Australia should always stand up for our national interests, and that's what the decision based on national security was in regards to Huawei, and the Labor Party supports that decision. I think that there is a point to make that this relationship has disintegrated, that at the point at which it is now is not working for Australians, it's not working for Australian businesses, it's not working for Australian agriculture, and if the government's satisfied with continuously losing China as a place to export Australian products, well then they should say so. If they're not satisfied with that, then what the government needs to do is outline a plan to improve the relationship, a plan to even be able to pick up the call to counterparts and have conversations to improve the relationship, because if that doesn't happen...
What is that plan? I mean, at the moment, ministers pick up the phone and in public they're diplomatic, they stand up for Australian values, and they still get rebuffed.
Well, that question of what is the plan is a really good one, but it shouldn't be asked to me as a Labor Party backbencher. It should be asked to the government. It should be asked to the Prime Minister. What is your plan to get this relationship back on track? Because at the moment, agriculture, resources, wine producers are all being left without a major customer, and it's hurting Australian businesses, it's hurting Australian jobs, and people are being left behind.
All right. We're a little short on time. Your thoughts on this? I mean, the relationship... We heard the other day the Trade Minister say the latest issue on various export items were rumours. Apparently over the weekend nothing too untoward happened. It's not in a good place though, is it, this relationship?
Well, look, I think we, and I'll be quick, but those technical issues will be worked through. We absolutely want to support our exporters, but it is an immature comment from Labor that we simply have to be nicer to them. Of course, if you're not always nice to everyone and tell them what they want to hear, you'll have a good relationship with them. But this relationship has to be more robust than that. We have to be able to support our exporters, which we do 100%, and then stand up for the issues that are important to Australians and have frank conversations with China.
But if the Chinese minister's not picking up the phone to our minister, unless the phone line's not working, it's not a technical issue, right?
Well,
it's
no, I mean technical...
It's a deliberate snub.
I meant technical issues in relation to why they're making changes to the exporting arrangements. But
we're being snubbed at the moment.
Well, I would say that every diplomatic channel is still open to us as Australia, and we will expend every diplomatic channel available to us.
But if a minister won't pick up the phone call from ours, that channel's closed, isn't it?
Oh, but it's not the only channel that's available.
You said every channel. I mean, clearly there's a few cul-de-sacs there.
Well, sure, but there is a lot of diplomats working very hard on this relationship. So is the Foreign Minister, so is the Minister for Trade, and they'll continue to do that.
Julian Simmons, Josh Burns, good to have your company today. Thank you.
Afternoon.
Pleasure.